Hello everyone, welcome to Fleet Explores. So it's not really a series title or anything, it's more just a description. So this is a Transport Fever 2 map I've been playing on and off for a couple of, well, about 6 months now I think, give or take. And I don't know, I kinda wanted to explore it, and given it's been going 100 years now, kind of give a history of the place, show off the routes that I've built, the history behind it. I don't know, I thought some people might find it interesting. So I know a lot of people in our community are railway buffs as much as I am, so while this isn't a game purely about railways, a lot of the stuff involved in the route was the construction of and operation of the railway network. And so we start where it all began, here in Bakewell. As I like to call it, the city on the edge, at the end of a very long peninsula. It was actually the first railway station we built, and is still served today. You'll notice that a lot of the passenger work for local services, commuter trains, and stopping services is operated by these New Haven single-car electric multiple units, formed into formations according to the needs of the service they're operating. In this case, Passenger Train Line 1, which I informally know as the Bakewell branch. This serves as the link. This was originally originally a main line, as it was the sole part of the network that existed. But now it's purely a branch line off of the main line network, operated by a combine multiple unit and a single coach multiple unit. These things don't have the best acceleration, but they are cheap to run and flat out can hit 70 miles an hour, which is perfectly adequate for commuter service and local trains. Speaking of, whoa! Okay, that's a bit weird. Whoa! Okay, whoa. Okay, that's a bit weird. Okay, we're gonna ride along the outside because, yeah, that's a bit weird. Okay. I think that's everybody who's getting off, and everyone who's getting on. All of our buses are these types of buses, nice and simple. But yeah, so there is a little bit of a lag time between departures and arrivals as we try to keep trains on schedule depending on the way in which various other parts of the network run. But there we go. And we're away. So obviously, not being they don't flip, they just turn around and go the other way. So we're off. I kind of picked this route to start with because it was fairly simple to build. And it also looks very scenic. So, set off down and over the peninsula. These were originally wooden trestles, but as train speeds increased, they were no longer fast enough to deal with the demands of the service, so they were replaced with steel trestles instead. But they still serve their purpose of carrying the branch line down and off the peninsula. That 30-mile-an-hour curve, I thought about removing it, but it does kind of remove the charm of the branch, so I've decided to keep it. The reduction in speed is not that bad. All of this trackage is one of very few parts of the network that is still original as built, and hasn't been upgraded or realigned throughout its existence, including the fact of why it still has the hump that was so follows the contours of the landscape as opposed to burrowing through it, as the realigned section of track work does. And here's the other branch train going the other way. Those are the flyovers for the express service that links one end of the map to the other. We're on our way inbound to Sandbach, one of, I think, 4 major junction stations. Oh, speaking of the express, there it goes. Headed by a Berkshire, with a rake of streamlined coaches. We'll get aboard that service at some point in the future. But for now, we're really heading towards the end of the terminus at Sandbach now. And for once, it looks like Sandbach Station Throat isn't actually backed up with traffic, which is kind of rare. Usually the approach to Sandbach Station is full of various different services awaiting platforms, but for once, it seems it's not actually going to be. For once, we're actually going to get a nice clear run into Sandbach proper. And here we are in Sandbach. Second city we linked and one of the largest towns on the map, including one of very few with its own airport. And here we have Sandbach bus and tram terminal. You've also got the ferry service. This is a tram line that provides a fast link to and from the ferry terminal. And speaking of, let's take a ride along so you can see Sandbach from the ground floor. So these electric locomotives and their little sets of coaches provide a effective link between the station and the ferry terminal, where the fast ferries provide a service across the water to another town across the way. Lots of buses here in Sandbach, obviously having to keep pace with the city's needs and trying to keep cars off the roads as much as we can has proven difficult, but we have mostly succeeded. Obviously this is the service that runs along the way. It doesn't stop at every bus stop, but it does stop on a decent number along the way. A lot of the through traffic we used to get is no longer as excellent as it used to be, owing to the fact that the tram service isn't as reliable as it used to be, owing to the collection of buses. As you can see, really caught up to the service that's ahead of us. And of course the fact that there are other trams that operate in the city that provide a similar effective service across the various parts of the network. But it's a vibrant city, it's a coastal city, it's a nice place to look at, it's nice to see. Lots of buses are rocking around, not so many cars. We have managed to really keep this place battened down in terms of being public transport centric. And of course we do also provide goods deliveries to this magnificent city, which has enabled it to grow to the size that it is. And for those military lovers among you, no, you are not mistaken, that is a 6x4 Ford GMC. Well, they actually replaced the Opel Blitzers, funnily enough, we used to have. Which is weird. But yeah, so they now are our lorries that do all of our lorry work for us. So, down we come, and here at the stub end is the terminus. And there is the ferry terminal. And we'll just hop over here and have a look. So currently, owing to their speed, our ferries are currently these a little bit long in the tooth paddle steamers. Since they are still, I believe, the fastest vessels that we can get. Although I will just quickly check that, given it is 1956. Oh no, we do actually have a faster ferry now. Excellent. Welcome to Hong Kong, boys. Welcome to Hong Kong. There it goes. Now we do have air travel. And speaking of, here comes one of the airliners we use now. Owing to the small size of the airports involved, unfortunately we weren't able to upgrade this route to use Constellation airliners. So, we're still stuck with Douglas DC-4s. Still, they are reliable and effective airliners, and provide a decent service from one side of the map to the other. Although that did take some of the wind out of the sails of the express train. And speaking of, while I've been nattering, I've been waiting for it to arrive. And here it is. And no, your eyes do not deceive you, that is a certain locomotive bearing a certain insignia. The reason for it is simple. It's the fastest and most powerful train I have access to that can work that express stock at 126 miles an hour. But we're waiting for this. Whoops. Not like that. Passenger Train Line 4, a single combine. This is actually... Passenger Train Line 2 was originally a long-distance route, a short-distance route just between these two areas. But, however, that has now changed. And it's now a long-distance stopping service to halfway across the map. It is one of the longer trains now You can see here how easy it is to form up these rakes of multiple units to whatever length I need them to be, keeping costs down and flexibility up wherever we need them. But we're now going to take a ride along. This is a passenger service out to a very small village that doesn't really generate much in the way of passenger traffic, but I feel the need to keep it connected to the network in terms of passengers because, well, it's always been connected, and even though the service operates at a little bit of a loss at times, that's not enough reason to get rid of it. Ah, up ahead we see the most profitable train on the network, the Crushed Stone service. And given the need to expedite it, it's worked by a 464 plus 4664 Challenger. Which expedites that service at very, very reasonable velocities indeed. And look at this, it's 1937, and we have a great deal of new kit available to us. But yeah, each of these trains generates a massive amount of revenue for the service. For the company, I should say. Oh my god, the amount of new trams we have, good lord. Well, we'll have to put those into service at some point. And there, off to the right-hand side of our local train, is the Express on its run across the water on the new alignment that was built for it. This is the old alignment. Unfortunately, steam isn't that prevalent on our freight services anymore. Most of them work by F7A and Bs. That's also one of the more profitable trains, another gravel train. So again, a lot of this is traditional alignment. Not much of it is new. In particular, we have the three-way Y junction that serves a large portion of the railway's freight traffic that exists. I had thought about rebuilding it, but given the confines that it's actually tightened up in, it's not really viable. So the Y with its speed restrictions has remained in place. Basically because I can't really think of a better alternative to it. So, here we are. Again, another pair of an F7AB pair with a mixed freight bound for Sandbach. So again, this was the second oldest part of the network built. Although this is the third oldest part of the network. This branch that links out to this area over here. Originally, the track work curved its way up and around the hump, but obviously it was realigned into a tunnel. Actually, fairly recently. This was one of the original profit makers of the company. A line that shipped grain out to a food processing plant to be turned into bread to be shipped off to places. One of the big extensions that was nearly bankrupted the company in its early days, there's another F7 Hold Freight, was actually bringing a passenger line out to here and linking it with a freight line. Owing to the speed restrictions of the curves before and after it, this is one of few places left on the network where the old wooden trestle originally built to carry the railway does still exist. And is extant. So, through the Summit Tunnel. So, originally it was up, through here, through here, through here, through here, up, through here, around, and then down. Then it was, I think there was like a branch where the freight trains would go up and over, and then the passenger trains would come through the tunnel. And then I just realigned it to have everything go through the tunnel. And I can't remember exactly when that was. Like, I have lost the... It's kind of like the Dark Age of technology. I've lost a lot of the old records of what used to be the exact way the lines looked. But yeah, so coming down now. Again, this is one of the very few 4-track sections of line anywhere on the network. And here's one of the oil trains worked by a 484. And a pair of train masters with another oil train. And here we have the small village of Upper Shildon, which has its own airport. Although, funnily enough, the airport actually only handles freight traffic, building materials, if you can believe it, which is also very profitable. And here we are. Now, let's take a look around here while we wait for a train to arrive to take us back. We're waiting passenger train line 5. So, as you can see, this is Shildon. Sorry, correction. This is Shildon. Now, this is the airport that carries the building materials aircraft. They're all very profitable indeed, and for this we do actually use the Super Constellations, operating out of a very rough field strip. The pilots have to have nerves of steel. Oh, and not mind having their wings clipped by trees. Here is where Trainmaster GM 6-axle diesels are actually quite prevalent indeed on some of the workings that we handle. And again, F7s are also very prevalent as well. Working mixed freights out of what is in essence a central freight depot. Challengers are also prevalent here on oil trains, working high expedited flows of crude over the hump. And of course, freight has priority. But here is our train. Passenger train line 6. And we're off again, back down the same route we came over, but we're going to take the other fork of the Y and follow the old route of passenger train line 2 to actually join passenger train line 2 as we head off towards the next phase of our exploration. Unfortunately, as per usual on this section of the main line, we'll have to wait for the freight, which pretty much I've signalled it in such a way that the freights have priority pretty much. But once the freights have cleared, we'll be underway. And of course, because we're next in the signaling queue, we have priority over the Challenger worked oil train. Electrification was something that I did rather early, to try and get the benefits of it, but not all of the electrics that we have access to through mods and through the base game have proven suitable in terms of cost economics for some of the trains we have to work. The company wasn't always as profitable as this. The steep gradients here do actually tax the motor cars quite heavily. But they usually do mostly okay, and it's only a single car on a branch train. Passenger train line 6 is a consistent loss maker, and it has been provided with the bare minimum of service to keep it connected to the network. There's very little demand for people going on this route, and there's very little interchange traffic either, since most of that is handled by other ways. People who want to travel further will take passenger train line 4, which we took to get here, to join the express train at Sandbach, and then others will take line 5, which links there to Oodle, if they want to connect to passenger train line 2 going that way. So there's very little interchange traffic, which usually makes up a large portion of the sort of services we run, which is why passenger train line 4 usually has mostly full single car units. There's a lot of traffic going to Sandbach to change to other trains. Whereas passenger train line 6 basically exists exclusively to serve point-to-point traffic, with there being very little demand for interchange traffic at all. And we're being pursued by a Challenger. As you can see, the network is very closely signalled, allowing for very close train pairs. Which you do very much need. And here comes another oil train returning to the depot to be filled with fresh, refined oil. And now I'm moving with a relative degree of speed. But as sometimes happened, the interchange is jammed up. This is something that does occur occasionally. And speaking of that Challenger, there he goes on his way to the oil wells. And now that he's cleared that, we can clear that and get ourselves moving over the interchange. I probably need to re-signal the Y to ensure it doesn't get jammed up, but, well, we'll see how we go. Ah! And there is the Express. Again. Waiting for its clearance. And there's passenger train line 2. Again, the 4-coach service. They rarely run as full as they used to, but I keep the service on because it provides enough capacity when we do have flare-ups. For the longest time, I'd given up expanding the network and I was tempted to just improve what I have. But very recently, I've kind of gotten the buzz in me to start completing connections again, adding new parts to the network, and so on and so forth. However, this part of the network is basically unrealigned. Again, it follows the contours of the land, and very little in the way of realignment has actually taken place. This is the original trackage that brings trains into what used to be the main line 1 and 2 into Stone Station. However, passenger train line 2 was realigned onto a new set of platforms specifically for its use, and as such, the inbound train overtook us on the underpass to arrive in Stone. Stone was the original terminus for the longest time of passenger train line 2. And we are just in time to hop a transfer to train 18. And you notice some of these units run pantograph facing towards Sandbach, and some of them run pantograph facing towards Stone. And you may say, if they're multiple units, why is that? Well, originally, for the longest time, obviously, this was loco hauled. And loco hauled trains flip. And as such, when the multiple units that don't flip, instead just obviously changing the direction of travel, entered service, the locos were pointing whichever way they were pointing, and then they flipped and went back the other way. So the traffic is not uniform. But yes, so now we're joining one of the newer sections. Well, not newer, actually, still fairly old. We broke. This was one of the first sections we built with the money that we got from the real expansion of oil traffic when that was added to the when oil traffic was added to the cargoes that we moved over the hump that we've just been over, where the grain traffic was. And the first thing we did was burrow through to Oundle. I think that's how you pronounce it. A lot of this track work here with the bridges and the tunnels, that's very much a newer trackage, very much so. So over the hump in the tunnel, and then out the other side. Now this line has been one of the most interesting because volume of passengers who want to use it varies depending on where you are on the network, as in where you are. Here's Express Line 3, which is a GG1 works service with an all-coach streamlined rake, with a dome car included for class, of course. And we'll get to that later. For now, we're mostly just riding the normal local services to get a lay of the land. And here we are into Oundle Station. As you can see, heading out towards Carlisle, there's plenty of traffic. From this point on, this is why the 4-coach rakes are needed. From this point on, the traffic does get quite high and demanding, and there is a real demand for it. Now, passenger train line 5 actually goes back to Shildon via a series of bridges. It was an expensive line to build and honestly hasn't really returned on its investment in any significant way, which I'm not very pleased with. But, hey-ho. This is Oundle. It's a fairly large, bustling town. There's the underpass, the Oundle underpass, which serves the express trains that run out to where we're headed. And as you can see, train is really starting to fill up now as we head out towards the next station, Carlisle. And there goes some F7 worked freights and a freight worked there 484. We hook a right out through the complicated track work at the bottom end of Oundle and off towards our next station stop, which is Carlisle. Now, this track work was realigned. It originally went over this hill rather than through it, but that's been realigned and now it goes under the hill instead. A lot of these realignments were done as time and money allowed, and it's helped to smooth out the network and increase running times, or rather decrease running times, and make things better. That's the overpass. Oh, and here we actually have something interesting. This is the narrow gauge. If there are things that I don't want to move by truck, and things that I don't want to actually build a full standard gauge railway, I build narrow gauge instead. Austrian narrow gauge to be particular. Most of it worked by these rod drive electrics. And here we are arriving into Carlisle Station, the penultimate stop. The Carlisle to Oudle section is very, very popular indeed. Probably because Oudle is a fairly popular interchange with traffic going to various different places. And here we are. Carlisle is a fairly popular town. And here comes a train coming back the other way. But as you can see, we do have a significant core of passengers who are through traffic. Since there are passengers in Transport Fever who do prefer cheap options to fast, there will always be people who want to take the slow, meandering passenger train line 2, rather than coughing out for the fast express that runs non-stop between Sandbach, where we started, and back up where we're going. Now the line dips into an exceptionally long tunnel under the mountains to back up. Now, this is so I will actually skip ahead a little bit. So this is not actually the line through to backup, because obviously you can see there's no overhead. It's one of the few parts of the network that actually has no overhead. That's the express and freight bypass line for another network that we'll be dealing with. Here we actually see another train. Now, it depends on how quickly the service is running and how things are being handled at backup station, depending on how the signaller works it. But trains can be quite stacked up behind each other, or they can be not. And there's the Challenger highballing its train of crushed gravel, weighing about 1,000 tons, towards its destination. And here's our train. On the final leg now, into backup station. Backup station. One of the other big junction stations on the network. Served by 2 local passenger train lines and a single express passenger line. For this particular bit, we're not going to ride along with the train, but we'll follow several of our trains along. So again, the power is the ubiquitous, these multiple units. But passenger traffic on passenger train line 7 has always been disappointing. What? Oh, you've got to be kidding me. Is that why? Oh, you've got to be having a... Well, folks, here you are. You saw it here first. No wonder that the passenger traffic had been so low down. No wonder people weren't willing to actually travel, you know, those distances. The station had been disconnected from the bus lines that had served it. There was no connection. So yeah, so this line, as you can tell, is more modern. This is the original alignment. And of course, here is actually one of the largest narrow gauge networks on the entire railway. But we'll get to that later. And here we actually have the first dual gauge interchange anywhere on the network. It's the first time you'll see standard gauge and narrow gauge sharing a station platform. And the narrow gauge lines in particular have proven especially popular, probably a bit more popular than the actual standard gauge lines they work alongside. Narrow gauge traffic on this part of the network is worked by diesels. Passenger traffic anyway. And as you can see, people wanting to come to the interchange to travel onwards to further destinations has proven very popular indeed. People get out and transfer to different trains to travel to places they want to go. In particular, a lot of them actually transfer to travel to the other narrow gauge line to travel further on. But some do transfer to the train to back up. From here, however, the line gets very, very scenic indeed. Hugging the coast, both freight, express and passenger trains work through very, very scenic territory indeed. And here we find one of the less successful, in fact, arguably out of all the express trains we run, the least successful. Express Line 3, worked by a single E8, and with a rake of 3 cars. It was actually designed to replace outright the Pioneer Zephyr sets that used to work this service. It does an acceptable job, but passenger numbers have never been all that high. It runs to Oodle, which of course is one of the really big interchange networks on the station. We come through here. There was originally a swing bridge here, but I got rid of it as it was slowing trains down exponentially and there was very little shipping traffic coming through here, and it was a set dressing with no real use. Oodle was originally set up as a large interchange for services I expected to run. However, it's only exceptionally recently that the plans have been put in place to actually bring those services to fruition and actually finish the railway network linking every single town on the map. This is Dinnington Airport. Dinnington Airport is the other end of the line that you saw in Sandbach, served by our DC-4s. At either end of that, there is an airport transfer worked by a classic London double-decker bus, given they're fast, have high capacity, and can do this job better than the basic buses can. Without further ado, though, we'll return to Jarrow. And we'll board a diesel train on narrow gauge line 2. And we'll take ourselves off on a journey through one of the busiest parts of the narrow gauge network built so far. Now, these diesels were brought in to replace the electrics, because they're much cheaper to run for non-freight workings. They're not as powerful, but they do the job mostly okay, and their top speed is the same, 31 miles an hour, which is fine for local passenger work. Now, a lot of my narrow gauge workings are sculpted as main lines in miniature. Very much so, in fact. There are some that have a little bit of a sort of rural backwater railway aspect to them, but most of my narrow gauge network always has been sculpted as mainline in miniature. Hang on, we're on the wrong train. That's the narrow gauge line that goes up and away through here, through some very nice country to the village of Sheepshead. Although, actually, while we're here, we should probably take a look north at some of the really old parts of the network. So starting here at Basingstoke Port, this is some of the newest naval infrastructure that we have. It provides links to a cargo tram line, industrial railway, that brings extra crude to the vast crude facilities that service the oil industry that we actually have functioning here. A lot of this used to be jammed up in lorries and wagons and other things, but recently we have managed to get it to a point where we have smooth operations with industrial railways instead. Both on the meter gauge, like here, and the standard gauge. These 262s are arguably still some of the most profitable trains on the network in terms of profit for cost. And they've been around for a very long time, since about the 1910s, working continuously, and honestly I have no need to replace them. So they'll probably work until, well, they're done working. There's also an industrial electric railway that does the same, though it's not as profitable. Here there is also meter gauge traffic as well, providing a link between the only two towns on this island. As again, this was the first narrow gauge railway built, as again, isolated as it is from the rest of the network, it made perfect sense to have it be the first place to receive narrow gauge railway assistance. However, here we have the really busy port of Stevenage. Stevenage Port is where all of our goods come out from. They mostly sail across this very, very busy water gap to here, where an industrial railway takes the goods, it brings unfinished products one way and sends finished products out another way. This is the reason why there are plenty of mixed freights operating out of Shildon Station. Because Shildon is basically where all of the freight networks come together and combine to actually provide services, and this is why a lot of the services out of Shildon have lots of mixed wagons, as these wagons appear based on what freight the train is carrying, to give the appearance of a freight train that's been made of multiple different cars from multiple different private companies. Anyway, but to get back to it. So, again, operating as a mainline in miniature, which the narrow gauge does, there is a lot of freight traffic on the network. Both grain and food, worked in long trains of box vans by these Coco rod drive electrics. Plenty of food and plenty, and I do mean plenty of other traffic is worked through. Food is transshipped out by ship, which also brings grain in, which is then taken on by train. Here the trackage splits to go either side of a road, and it has allowed me to create some very complex and interesting junctions. Although they are very, very complex and interesting in a few ways. With plenty of traffic knocking around between them. It is very much mainline in miniature territory, and somehow the passenger trains have got to wend their way through all this and not get caught up. The narrow gauge is also one of the places you will see the wood bridges still prevalent, as wood bridges are, well, the maximum speed they can take is 56, and no narrow gauge engine can travel over 50 miles an hour. However, one of the few places where intercity transport is not actually the preserve of the railway is here, where I tried an experiment to see if intercity coaches were something that could actually work. It seems, however, that they don't. And as such, it's remained a little bit of an experiment, which isn't really bearing much fruit. Despite the fact they are relatively quick off the mark. Now we come back through the areas we've already seen, including the freight interchange. Well, this is the freight interchange at Carlisle South, which is where a lot of the oil products that the island producers come out of, and you'll basically see being exclusively served by oil and fuel trains. going to different places. However, with all that aside, we now have to follow Express Line 4, which is... Sorry, Express Line 2, I should say, which is a GG1 working a rake of very, very flashy, all steel, or all aluminium probably, streamlined coaches. These rakes follow the basically new express line built almost exclusively for their use, although some freight traffic does use it as well, as you can see. Although the freight trains hook a left and down towards the place they're headed to, whereas the express trains will speed along over and through, accelerating rapidly towards 100 miles an hour, which is their maximum speed. Along a new alignment basically built for them to massively accelerate the rate at which they move along the network. For once, though, it does seem that the railway has somewhat stabilised, and we're actually going to get the two express trains passing exactly where they should, rather than one being right at the tailcoats of the other, as has been the case networkally for a while. This is also where Passenger Train Line 3 comes along. Starting at Stone, it runs through Nantwich and arrives here at Tottenham. Tottenham is the only 5-track railway station on the network, and is the busiest place on the network, with 2 express trains, 2 regular passenger lines, and a commuter railway served by its 5 platforms. The commuter trains are a different variant of the New Haven single-car electric multiple units in a more modern livery. In fact, I call the entire line we're about to go down the miniature New Haven, since all of the stock on it is New Haven alike, including the express train. It's also the only place on the network where you'll find genuine 4-track in use, well, trackage basically. And for once, it looks like the express is going to get an actual decent arrival and not be delayed, which is very nice indeed. So after leaving Tottenham, which is also coincidentally the other end of the ferry route from Sandbach, the services join what was originally a 2-track main line, but with the addition of the commuter railway now is a 3-track section, before it then becomes a 4-track section after some rather complicated track work. Then, under the wires, as you can see, we basically move ourselves along. The 2 centre roads are reserved for the normal local passenger trains and the express passenger trains. Originally there was a lot of passenger demand, which is why I created the commuter railway, because the normal railway just couldn't deal with the amount of traffic, so I decided to create a commuter service to take some of the weight off the local passenger trains. And it's worked quite well, actually. So over the hump, over the level crossing, and through to, again, one of the... And speaking of, here's an express. A New Haven express train, which provides a fast link to the other end of the line. Although it may have to be lengthened given how popular it's actually proving. We come to Leighton Buzzard, which is also a place where where there's another narrow gauge, standard gauge interchange. One of only 2 places on the network it happens. This is also one of the rare instances where we actually have electric worked passenger trains owing to the steepness of the gradients on the line around here. Now, we do actually have freight traffic here as well, with freight trains coming out of a quarry that serves a lot of the interests of the railway, including a lot of freight like this. However, owing to shipping traffic, we had to build one of the most grandiose projects I've ever had to do. A pair of massive suspension bridges to carry 2-foot gauge railway track. Looks pretty cool, though. This is Tottenham Construction Materials Plant, the most important customer that our company serves, providing construction materials to both aircraft and narrow gauge trains that transship out a significant portion of the company's profits through its massive need to consume quarried materials. But yes, so from Leighton Buzzard, the express line, which is the newest section of trackage on the network, by the way, cuts through both of the other intermediate stations at Witney and splits itself out here, arriving at the newest interchange, Waltham Abbey. And oh dear lord, Express Line 4 is proving exceptionally popular indeed. We need to massively lengthen the trackage, or the amount of... Yeah, we need to massively lengthen the express. That's not... Two extra coaches, 2 parlour cars, and an observation. This does massively lengthen the train, but hopefully it should be able to keep up with demand now. Hopefully it won't have too much of an effect on the train's timings. But we'll see. This is Waltham Abbey. It has a tram network that provides most of the services that it needs. Served by PCC cards, if you can believe it. Although I do need to finish the bus network that's supposed to go with the tram network, but that can come later. For now, we need to finish our tour of the network, with the newest and most modern of the main lines. The northern main line that runs across the northern edge of the map. This was built exceptionally recently, and as you can see by the way in which it follows the path of least resistance in terms of gradients, is easily the most modern of the main lines. And some of these stations do have branch lines to serve places like Mablethorpe, into Bath, and then through into Sudbury. As sort of a branch line running through those towns. Maybe linking into backup, I'm not sure, we'll see how we go. Then Oakhampton, which is, again, second-hand terminus, and then Witham, which is the end of the line for now. Also has a branch, which again I'm planning to have. So the main line will probably run on from Witham into Dinnington. Maybe there might be a... I'm thinking there probably will be a main line that runs through Woking, Mablethorpe, Bath. We'll see. We'll see how we go. I'm not sure. But yeah, so... Now we've covered the passenger side of the business, let's have a look at some of the freight workings. So... A lot of the freight workings are unprofitable, unfortunately. They either break even or they don't quite even manage that. For some of the heaviest freight trains, steam is still the cheapest and easiest way to move them without breaking the bank. These 484s used to be prevalent as the heaviest freight engines, but then, of course, the Challengers came in to replace them on certain key services. And as the network expands, profitability is up as the amount of passengers we're moving is increasing as well. However, the most profitable trains demanded expedited delivery, so the 484s were replaced by the much more expensive to run but infinitely more powerful Challengers, and profits have exploded as a result, with the trains able to keep to track speed basically the entire length of the way. Anything shorter than that is in the hands of F7s, usually AB pairs. They're cheap to run, relatively powerful, and handle pretty much anything I can throw at them in terms of freight. Electrics were used, in particular P5 and P5A electrics on the Pennsylvania Railroad, but they were a little too expensive to run and didn't quite put down their tractive effort as effectively as the diesels could, owing to the way in which they were built. But of course, how can we touch upon the express trains without touching upon the pride of the network? Express Line 1. The absolute cream of the network's passenger services. Worked by a Berkshire with a rake of express passenger cars behind it. It is a mostly profitable fast express. Oh dear, excuse me. This is what I meant by Sandbatch backing up sometimes. This happens, unfortunately. And we have to deal with it. There is also road transport. Since a lot of the goods that come in, since Stone Transfer is a place where a lot of goods do arrive, we decided that I would use it as a centre of a trucking network to serve places that the railways don't really serve, via road haulage. It's not... The concept has not really been a massive success, if I'm honest. Speaking of expresses, here comes Express Line 1. This is basically one of the only services that reliably breaks 100 miles an hour anywhere on the network. And it looks like it. It's only because of this high speeds that the Express is actually profitable. People actually want to take the train. And it does a relatively good job of making the service comfortable and reliable. Especially if you've got a clear signal path through like it does Oh, no, it's not going to have. Well, it's going to be held short as it sometimes is. But it sometimes happens. That's just the way it is. Very little passenger demand around Loughborough, which is a shame. But, hey-ho. We shall see. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this little exploration of Transport Fever 2 I have been working on. And some of the little bit of the history behind it. If this sort of content appeals to you and you'd like to see more of it, let me know. Maybe I can actually run a Transport Fever 2 series. And if people just want a little bit more exploration of a map that I've already built, with a little bit of history behind it, I do actually have a European map we can also go and have a look at. Until then, I've been Fleet of Oceans, and thank you for watching. Goodbye.